Mud squelched underfoot as trainers pounded across the chalky lines hastily drawn on the schoolyard, breath hanging in the chilly morning air. Somewhere behind, a bell clanged hollowly distant warning or encouragement, no one could tell, and shouts of Bulldog ricocheted off the red brick walls, carried on the wind and the wild hopes of children determined not to be caught. This was the world beyond the classroom, a patch of tarmac, unpredictable and electric, where everyday friendships and rivalries were settled, with a sprint and a tackle rather than pens and sums. It's the late 1970s, at a typical comprehensive on the edge of a northern mill town. The blacktop of the playground is cracked from countless cold winters and sudden moves, battered and divided by lines that marked football pitches in the summer and, come September, the battlefield for British Bulldog. PE kits ill-fitting shorts, acrylic football socks that slip down, and hand-me-down plimsolls from the corner shops struggle to keep up with legs growing faster than hems can be let out. Rumbles of excitement start before the last lesson and spill out onto the tarmac as children edge forward, eyeing up their chances. The sense of freedom is as palpable as the bite of autumn wind after the warmth and order of class, and it's here, under clouded northern skies, that the call goes up, Bulldog, and all hell is let loose. Near the fence, a gaggle of girls don brightly colored jumpers, swapping stories about last night top of the pops, or the rumor that the tuck shop might finally get in more curly-whirlies. But even they are drawn into the chaos, shrieking with laughter as someone in a well-meaning parka barges by, trying to dodge the clutch of the Bulldog. On the far side, past the line of weedy fecal beds, there's the unmistakable scent of oil and exhaust. The caretaker's battered milk float, humming quietly, delivering its glass-bottled wares to the dinner ladies assembling sticky sausage rolls and chocolate sponge for lunch. Beyond, the council estate slides away down the hill rows of pebbledash, the distant calls of mothers summoning the youngest home with a clang of saucepans on metal sinks, ready for an egg flip or a mug of strong tea. There's a rough democracy to Bulldog. Fast or slow, tall or little, the only thing that seems to count is determination and luck. At the heart of the scrum, knees are grazed and elbows smudged with playground dust. But quarrels are settled fast and victories celebrated with a fist pump or a sly punch on the arm. There's no real divide among the players, sons and daughters of miners and managers, shared out in jerseys faded from a dozen older siblings. In those moments, background melts away. You are simply judged on your dash, your feint, your cunning as you dodge and weave through outstretched arms. The game draws in even those who protest, pulled in by the urge to run, escape, belong, one of the unspoken rights that shape you, mark you forever as someone who remembers what Bulldog really meant. Music from someone's battered radio, propped on a classroom window ledge, leaks through the crisp afternoon air, maybe a snatch of the Jam or Blondie, clipped and tinny by the time it reaches your ears. The teachers, half amused and half worried, keep an eye out for scuffed knees that might require a dab of TCP, or, worse, a letter home. There's a taste of salt in the air from the chip shop across the road, the one where dinner money sometimes stretches to a shared portion of chips wrapped in newspaper vinegar, mingling with the heady thrill of unsupervised time. The round bell clangs urgently. Choices are made in a heartbeat, one last charge or a tactical retreat. The risk of detention weighed against the desire to outpace, just once, the school's fastest. The rules of Bulldog shift with each group, each day, fluctuating like the weather. Sometimes, it's just a matter of crossing the yard without being caught and lifted other days. The game inflates to a full-tilt collision, the stakes rising as the Bulldogs multiply and the safe zone shrinks. Despite the occasional protest rugby's less dangerous, some argue no other game has quite the same glory in its messiness or popularity. Even those on the sidelines, the ones trading panini stickers or swapping smuggled sherbet dips from Woolworths, keep an eye on proceedings, knowing they too are only ever an invitation away from the show. It's a microcosm of childhood played out in dust and scraped knuckles and air that still smells faintly of last night's bonfire, night smoke, or the promise of snow. As the decade ticks on and new worries seep into everyday life, grumblings about miners' strikes, power cuts, and the threat of rain closing the pitches, the playground remains an oasis where those troubles shrink to nothing. Here, the only electricity worth fretting about is the one that crackles between you and the finish line, adrenaline giving wings to leaden feet. At home, the telly might flicker with grim headlines, but, on the yard, reality is redrawn with every game. New champions crowned and grudges forgotten before the home time bell. Yet, even as the clang of the bell signals the last game, things begin to change. Safety concerns creep in. Teachers start to frown at the bruises and the more spectacular tumbles. By the early 80s, rumors swirl of the game being banned at some schools for fear of lawsuits or the dreaded trip to casualty. New games, with softer edges and fewer collisions, sneak in from the pages of it's a knockout, or, inspired by the next strange PE teacher's curriculum. Playgrounds themselves change, grass replaces tarmac, new fences go up, and lunchtime supervision grows sterner, less tolerant of risk. The world in miniature that once ruled the half-hour before lessons and just after lunch ebbs away, replaced by other rituals, other distractions. Arcade machines blinking at the chippy, Walkmans, shared undercoats, homework and part-time jobs rising to compete with the call of the yard. But those who played Bulldog remember the churning thrill in your stomach as you committed to a run, the cold slap of air in your lungs, the glorious triumph of reaching the far wall untouched. A memory both singular and communal. No other game quite captured the haphazard unity of those moments. A tribe of children, shoulder-to-shoulder, daring the world, or at least Mr. Stevens on playground. The late afternoon sun slants across a schoolyard of cracked tarmac, casting long shadows of skipping ropes as they whip and arc through the air. You hear it before you see it. The slap of rope on ground, a scatter of plimsoll souls, and the unmistakable chorus of children intoning salt, mustard, vinegar, pepper. There is a gentle, persistent rhythm in the air half game, half ritual as the skipping rope spins, and the world, for a few precious moments, narrows to a circle drawn by friends, laughter, and playground chants. To step back into a schoolyard in 1970s Britain is to summon not just childhood, but a particular kind of freedom that flourished before health and safety notices and after-school clubs took over. It's a February afternoon, and the chill has not yet surrendered to spring, but the air is alive with movement. Girls in hand, meet-down cardigans, and boys in scuffed shorts gather along the painted hopscotch lines, their breath puffing white in the fading light. The school building stone and red brick, its windows often rattling with the wind looms behind them, holding secrets of rain-soaked indoor playtimes and the faint, comforting reek of school dinners thick with custard and semolina. Near the bike sheds, amid the clatter of roly choppers and battered satchels, the skipping games begin in earnest. The ropes, sometimes frayed, sometimes homemade from washing line, are wielded by veterans of the trade. Skipping is its own language, with rules and pecking order known to all. The longer you last without a misstep, the greater your status. All is played out to a familiar soundtrack, Old rhymes handed down, ever morphing bluebells, cockle shells, easy ivy over, jelly on the plate, wibble wobble, and of course, the endless variations of salt, mustard, vinegar, pepper. As the rope spins, fists tighten on tenpence coins meant for the tuck shop, eager to trade for sherbet fountains or fizzy cola bottles at break. Every playground, it seems, had its own character. In Manchester's inner city, the ground might be hard-packed, faintly tinged by the smudge of coal lorries on the main road. The air occasionally spiced with the metallic temps of rain on warm tarmac. In suburban Kent, shoes pressed daisies into the grassy border by a slab of concrete. And the playground rang with the sound of distant milk floats, the chink of bottles still fresh in the morning's memory. At coastal schools, sea breezes tugged at hair bows, and the skipping ropes seemed to snap a little faster in the brisk salt air, even as the sound of distant gulls laced through the steady thump and chant. Oddly, the rhymes seldom changed, with geography a reminder of how such folklore wove its way, almost untouched, across county lines and class divides. There was a time, not so long ago, when the schoolyard was a stage for social learning as much as for games. Few who skipped could forget the sting of the rope on the backs of their legs, or the way it tangled hopelessly at your feet as older children egged you on. Never cruel, but always upholding the tribal law of turn-taking and perseverance. Scalps grazed by hairbands, knees bearing the cost of an ambitious leap, socks forever sliding down inside start-right shoesel, were the little badges of honor of the skipping set. Cheered on, cajoled, and if luck was in a little bit envied, the star skipper might manage to keep going through 2, sometimes 3 verses, feet never missing a beat. Those who stumbled would be taken aside and shown how to catch the rhythm, because next time was always another chance. On some days, skipping spilled beyond the school gates. If the afternoon was fine, children from cul-de-sacs and terraces would bring homemade ropes out onto the pavement after tea. The clatter of the rope against stone, the yelps and squeals mingled with the distant drone of a black and orange Midland red bus making its rounds, or the jingling bell of the local ice cream van, promising lions-made lollies for any pocket with a stray. Parents would glance out, arms dusted with flour from pastry or laundry soap, happy enough to leave us to our own devices, so long as the rowdiness did not carry itself into the gardens. On rainy days, skipping ropes might be replaced by rubber bands knotted into intricate strings for games like elastics. But the heart of it, the rhythm, the rhymes, the breathless competition remained. This sense of community, of belonging not just to a street or a class, but to an entire way of life, was stitched deeply into the skipping games of post-war Britain and well into the 1980s. These were years when time was measured out not by smartphone alarms, but by the arrival of the stop me and by one tricycle cart or the chime of the school bell at 4 o'clock. Skipping, as simple as it was, embodied a kind of togetherness. Everyone knew the rules even if they changed with each New Year group, and everyone could take part, from the shyest child to the self-appointed playground queen. The playground itself was democratic. No one particularly cared if your uniform was threadbare, or if your sandwiches had margarine instead of butter. The shared rituals, the rope, the rhyme, the race for the next turn made equals out of all. Yet, as the decades turned, new distractions crept in. By the late 1980s and early 90s, playgrounds saw the rise of Tamagotchis and Game Boys, Walkmans clipped to blazer pockets, and friendships mapped out in phone calls rather than face-to-face games. Skipping ropes, still present at sports day or the odd pay lesson, became relics rather than reigning kings. The tarmac was redrawn, sometimes literally new safety surfaces. Strict zoning while after-school lives shifted indoors, shaped by TV serials, video rentals from Blockbuster or Woolworths, or the latest chart topper recorded to a C90 cassette. The playground, once echoing with 100 voices chanting in time, grew quieter, the skip and slap of rope fading to memory. Its rhymes heard mainly from those looking back. Still, to mention salt, mustard, vinegar, pepper, is to spark an almost physical recall, the way the rope bit at your ankle, the taste of cold air in your lungs, the thrill of being counted in. For a generation or several, the language of skipping is a secret code. Beneath a sky so wide and blue it dwarfed the low rooftops of post-war terraces, a wedge of sunlight spilled across the tarmac of a primary school playground. The bell had just released a surging tide of children in grey shorts and fraying dresses, their knees already patched and scuffed with the earnest energy of the day. In the sharp autumn air there was the scent of damp leaves crushed beneath, Dunlop plimsolls, and the faint tang of fresh tar from summer repairs. A distinctly British playground, framed by the echo of distant footballs and the comforting clink of china cups from the caretaker's lodge. It was here, in the brisk interludes between lessons, that two legendary games defined reputations, stoked rivalries, and tested the sheer, unyielding mettle of youth British Bulldog and Red Rover, vying to be crowned the true king of childhood courage. At first glance, both games looked strikingly similar. Lines of children, arms tangled and locked in a stubborn chain, eyes glinting with anticipation, the bark of names ricocheting across the playground, growing more urgent as the next challenger was summoned. Yet each had its own ritual, its own simple code, known intimately by every child from Clacton to Carlisle. The rules were passed down in breathless whispers, sometimes in the corner of the hopscotch grid, sometimes huddled behind the battered green shed where the football nets lived. British Bulldog was raw, anarchic energy, a single bulldog in the center, their task to capture the runners storming towards the safety of the far side. Red Rover, though, introduced a flair of ceremony, hands knotted fast, waiting for the call. Red Rover, we call Henry over. It was the moment of truth, as the chosen one charged full tilt, the fearful hope that you might snap the chain, or else be dragged into its thicket of grasping arms. British Bulldog was, by far, the more notorious. In the 1970s and early 1980s, when playgrounds still featured concrete expanses unsoftened by health and safety, it thrived in all its reckless glory. There was a certain mythos that attached itself to the game, made up of tall tales, scraped elbows, broken glasses, even the odd visit to sister in the medical room for a dab of TCP. To win at Bulldog was a matter of grit pure, ferocious acceleration through the weak spots, your breath clouding in the cold, your heart hammering with both dread and thrill. Bulldog demanded nothing less than total commitment. A single mistake, and you'd be snatched, hoisted with a rough, proud laughter into the ranks of the Bulldogs, until only the fleetest and most daring remained. Yet Red Rover too held its own special magic. It was, perhaps, the more tactical of the two, a game not only of power but of cunning. Every move was calculated, the forming of the chain, the selection of who would charge, and then the split-second choices about which arms looked weakest, which friend might let you through just this once. There was a particular suspense that hung in the air when your name was called, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation as you paced back from the line, the chorus of friends behind you raising the stakes with every cheer and jeer. The risk was quieter, but no less real. When wrists were strained or knees gave way, there was always the hush of concern, the rubbing of bruised knuckles. Afterwards, arms linked again, the giggles and jostles melted away any pain, and you rejoined the chain for the next round. The games bled sound into every corner of the school grounds. Any bystander could chart the progress of a round by the wild, rising volume, a sudden roar as the chaser broke through, the chorus of groans or applause as they were captured, the staccato chants and impromptu advice tossed from the sidelines. Teachers looked on with a mix of resigned amusement and exasperation. A tilt of the head, a hand momentarily raised, if tempers frayed or collisions ran a little too wild. In some schools, cries of "not in these shoes." Saw girls in Clark's start-right T-bars cunningly sidestep the roughest rounds, only to sneak in later for a vengeful burst. The heat of summer was marked by sticky palms and the sweet tang of a lion's-made fab. Lolly grabbed from the ice cream van parked outside at the end of term. Come winter, you played in the misty breath of January, with chilblained hands and the taste of lukewarm Rabena sipped from a battered thermos. Each corner of Britain produced its own variations. Sometimes Bulldog was Relivo, or Bulrush. Sometimes Red Rover's phrases were twisted by local tongue. But everywhere, there was the same thrill in the fight for freedom. The steely determination to hold the line or burst through. Playground alliances shifted as easily as clouds across a February sky. One day, best friends beckoned each other with a sly nod. The next, they doubled up to halt even the burlest runner. Small dramas unfolded with every round, giving future storytellers a rich harvest of nostalgia. The pair of new trainers smeared with mud on their very first outing, the shriek of torn gabardine, the heartbreak and laughter stitched up on the way home. For those who grew up in that era, these games fed a deeper sense of community and togetherness. They were rites of passage long before structured after-school clubs and adult-supervised sports. Arm in arm, you learned whom you could trust, discovered when to risk everything for the win, and tasted the sting of defeat smudged by a pat on the back or a new alliance. Playgrounds, those democratic spaces behind the high walls of every primary or junior school, were where the realities of class and status often blurred. If just for 20 minutes at break, the local rec or common, too, played host. After-school Bulldog until twilight, the only curfew, the distant clatter of plates from open kitchen windows, and the promise of fish fingers for tea, with the comforting fizz of Tizer shared between friends. Of course, the pulse of change could not be held back forever. By the late 1980s and into the 90s, the tide was turning. Bulldog faced the clampdown of growing school safety codes. With letters home and breathless headlines, Red Rover lingered on, a little gentler. But the spread of all-weather play surfaces and the rise of computer games and after-school clubs chipped away at their dominance. Today, the echoes, a sharp gust whistles round the red brick corner as the dinner bell shrills, unleashing a turbulent tide of children onto the tarmac. Plimsolls slap against painted hopscotch grids. The scent of cut grass drifts through gaps in the playground fence. Beneath picture-book clouds, the ritual gathers pace. The first shouts, hands clasped, hearts thudding, as the game of kiss chase begins anew. For a brief, giddy window each lunch break, the schoolyard is transformed, not just into an arena of childish pursuit, but into a crucible of bravado, bashfulness, and secret longing, all wrapped in the bracing air of a 1970s weekday. The bell's echo hasn't faded before factions form. An unspoken code flickering among fringe-tugging girls and grimy knit boys. Some stand apart, shy, giggling with agonized anticipation. Will they be chosen? Or will they dodge, breathless, for the whole of lunchtime? Others, bold as brass, march straight into the fray, their intentions obvious to anyone who's ever thrilled at the chase. Under the watchful eye of Mrs. Goddard, the dinner lady, alliances shift like the clouds overhead. Boys chase girls until the inevitable rule reversal. That moment when the hunted turn, shrieking, on the hunters. Everyone knows someone who's the fastest, her plaits flying. She's a shadow round the dustbin, impossible to catch. There's always a lad with an unchecked grin, too enthusiastic, who pushes the rules and turns every corner with a whoop. Loose change jingles in pockets, a halfpenny kept back from sweet money, while conker strings and elastic bands wait restlessly on playground walls for their moment in the spotlight. A circlet of girls, pretending indifference, examine their rubbers, those scented erasers from the newsagent shaped like strawberries and cola bottles, before being swept up, squealing as a clumsy pursuer closes in. Near the wire fence, an older boy already sporting hints of adolescent swagger loiters with a teenage magazine filched from his sister. The pop pages folded and dogged. Kiss chase is, for some, a lark. For others, it's a rehearsal for mysteries as yet unspoken. Each giggle masking a rumor that so-and-so fancies so-and-so. Words carried on the playground wind and repeated in lower voices over jam sandwiches later. Beyond the games, the playground is its own bustling marketplace, marked by the aromas of hot chips and vinegar that sometimes waft over from the chip shop across the way. In the colder months, woolly tights squeak as legs jump rope and mittens are swapped for a go with someone's packet of spangles. The lines for marbles and skipping, chalked by hand, become blurred in the chaos. Every boundary up for negotiation. In the shadow of the outbuilding where bikes lean too deep and a faded sign for Tizzer is nailed askew, the custard-colored walls offer little shelter from the northern wind. But the collective energy could warm even the frostiest day. The hum of an electric milk float inches down the lane, and, if you're lucky, you might just spy the crate of bottles on its side enough to distract from pursuers, if only for a moment. Teachers hover by the staff room's open window, a fug of cigarette smoke drifting onto the yard as they murmur over stewed tea. Their distant presence is a comfort and a threat. A whistle peals at the first sign of trouble. But most misdemeanors, especially the surreptitious pecks and clumsy hand-holding, go unremarked, canonized into playground legend instead. The kids with battered Beano annuals clutch them tight for later swaps under the copse of sycamore. The more daring smuggle penny chews and fizzes out from blazer linings, a monarchy of sugar and dares. Everything is sharper in this hour. The skinned knees, where gravel bites through grey wool socks. The flustered faces, red with cold or excitement or both. The laughter that rings out so clear, impossible to resist. In those moments, the world contracts to the bounds of the playground, a safe haven where the strictures of home and classroom temporarily loosen. Even the playground's natural hazards, a puddle half frozen on its surface. A scuffed football skittering loose from the bigger boys' game can't dampen the spirit. If you pause beneath the chestnut tree, the air tastes faintly of wax crayons and potato starch, while somewhere, always, is the electric tang of anticipation. Will today be your day to run, to chase, to be caught? Sometimes the big games end in scandaler disputed catch, or some clever soul sneaking through the caretaker's gate. But no rivalry ever lasts beyond the afternoon. The lore of the playground is ephemeral. What matters most is crafted in that hour, shared and forgotten in turn. When the bell calls everyone back to class, and you trail in with the rest, the stories remain, sparking glances and nervous laughs, threaded through with the still tingling fear of having your hand squeezed in the middle of the chase. For generation after generation, these playground games stitched bonds across classrooms, postcodes, and even social divides. In towns where the high street boasted a Woolworths with jars of cola cubes and the corner shop still chalked prices on the pavement. Lunchtime was a world apart, a microcosm of everyday Britain at play. Kiss, chase, elaborate and innocent, wove its own fragile links of belonging, embarrassment, and early lessons in empathy. Children learned the geometry of courage, not only the grit needed to chase or be chased, but to face the laughter and then fold it away at home, the secrets safe until next break. But, as the years turned, the character of the playground shifted with the weather of change. By the late 1980s and 1990s, rules grew stricter around personal space and playground supervision. Parents voiced new anxieties, and games like Kiss Chase fell from favor, often replaced by just as ruddy, if less fraught, alternatives. The hum of the milk float faded. Ice lollies from the ice cream van usurped penny sweets from corner shops now closing down. The advent of video games, risk assessments, and new playground equipment altered the landscape, introducing bright plastic where once stood wooden climbing frames and powdery tarmac. Memories remained, though etched in the minds of those who knew that moment of lurching dread and delighted escape. If you listen carefully, the echoes of laughter still float in the air above the swings, and the early summer sun, golden and unhurried, splays lazily across the tarmac as shrill laughter shoots through the air, punctuated by the solid clack of a stone on concrete. Chalky fingerprints streak small hands as a half-dozen hopefuls line up along a pastel constellation of numbered squares. The world beyond the terraced rooftops. The distant whir of a milk float fading into morning feels momentarily suspended. Caught in a bubble of childhood games and gentle competition. Hopscotch. Simple, ancient, yet forever renewed in the lively metronome of skipping feet and the raucous debate over whose turn comes next. In the late 1960s, even as mods and rockers marked their tribes and the Beatles spilled out from wireless sets, the pavements of working-class estates and provincial suburbs made space for a different sort of energy. Watchful mothers nattered from behind twitching net curtains. Minds half on the Sunday joint, half on the skinned-knee diplomacy unfolding below. School blazers discarded for the day, children fished broken bits of chalk from pockets, scavenged from school blackboards, or the kindly corner shop owner who'd grown wise to such needs. The scale of excitement could seem even then disproportionate to the tools required. A stub of chalk, the flatest stone or bottle cap you could find. Some swore by marbles, others treasured a bit of beach glass as a lucky talisman. Soon enough, the pale lines would snake across the footpath outside number 34. Squares growing a little skew as the years wore on and hands grew bolder. The artistry wasn't just in the numbers. Borders rimmed with swirls or stars, perhaps, a hopscotch court with a looping, lopsided smile at the top, as if inviting each newcomer to share the joke written in dust. Every session brought with it the unspoken rituals. At one end, the anticipation, tensed shoulders. At the other, the crucial opening gambit. The ideal toss had a practiced carelessness, all the better for impressing a watching crowd. The shriek of delight when a lucky stone landed neatly within its numbered square was matched only by the competitive groans. Was that over the line? Did it nudge into the next? Sometimes, fate was called in by the older sibling presiding as referee. Hopping commenced. 1 foot, 2, switch, skipper, ballet performed for the watchful eyes all around. School holidays carried with them the giddy sense of endless opportunity. On streets where milk bottles clustered in rows, at the thresholds and later lamplighters still flickered on the approaching dusk, Hopscotch games could continue until the long shadows stretched out and the mothers' voices pierced the still warm evening air. There was little traffic to disturb the reverie. Most families didn't own a car, and for the few that did, a gentle warning from the driver was enough to pause proceedings. Stones gently pocketed and chalk patterns patiently left in situ for a better time. The air, fragrant with privet, and the sharp, sweet tang of tar warmed by the sun, seemed to absorb each footfall. For those lucky enough to snare a sixpence, perhaps from errand running or pocket money for good behaviour, there was the promise of an ice lolly or a sherbet fountain from the corner shop at the top of the road. Lions-made lollies glistened in the little freezer, offering cool sanctuary after a hard-fought hopscotch round. Change, counted out in threepenny bits, was tucked away, sticky with the residue of summer hands. Woolworths, with its jumble of toys and rainbow pick-and mix, sometimes offered a brighter, more ambitious piece of choker status symbol if your home court allowed imported colors. School playgrounds, meanwhile, bore more official courts in rain-washed white, always a little more severe. Never as friendly as the ones that curved their way past your own front door. Not every court belonged to the suburban sprawl. In mining villages and northern market towns, where terraces clustered shoulder to shoulder and the horizon was carved by chimney stacks, hopscotch offered a brief escape from the muted worries of adulthood. Here, at the height of the miners' crises, fathers trudged home with cold-archened hands, sometimes pausing to let the children finish their rounds. The squares massed together between drying, washing, and battered tin dustbins, drawn and redrawn as the coal dust thickened and the rain insisted on washing yesterday's games away. Spirits, though, were not so easily erased. Every new court was a reclamation of laughter, a statement that not all was toil and worry. Hopscotch even seeped into the urban heart of 1970s cities, filling alleys between tower blocks or commandeering a rare, empty car park. Traffic noise never quite doused the chirrup of playing children. For a generation yet to know the lure of early video games or the privacy of headphones, hopscotch proved a social adhesive. Schoolmates and neighbors mingled, disputes settled in short bursts of hop, skip, and squeal. At the fringes, the rhythm of bus conductors, bells, and the shout of a market stallholder, hawking runner beans, wove together in an oddly comforting counterpoint, while the smell of chips from the local chippy curled through the air. As the decades turned, the hopscotch courts still appeared, if perhaps a little less regularly. By the 1980s, with high streets filling with neon signs, CASS, ET teeps, and boxy televisions, the pavements remained carriers of pale chalk hieroglyphs from the night before. Kids in short shorts and sun-faded t-shirts gave the old game a new soundtrack. The distant thump of Top of the Pops broadcast from a window, or the fizz of opened cans of Tizer, cooling parched throats in sudden electric heat waves. A new layer of graffiti sometimes crept onto the courts, urban art and hopscotch blending in a chaotic mural that said, more than anything, we are still here. Why did hopscotch matter so? To an outsider, it was perhaps no more than aimless skipping and the pursuit of ground-down relics of chalk. But there's a reason why these bright, transient squares burned themselves into so many childhood memories. The game was democracy. Any age, any ability, any makeshift stone could claim a place. Hopscotch built tiny communities curbside. Alliances formed, disputes rooted through good-humored referees. Patience learned and victories earned with the grace of a hop and the crash of a missed square. And unlike the cricket matches or marbles games, close your eyes and listen. There on a bracing September morning under a leaden English sky that promises rain but stubbornly holds. Back, a band of children clusters round the spindly horse chestnut in the corner of the school field. You hear the rhythmic slap of Wellington boots on damp grass, the woody rattle of conkers tumbling from waxy green shells, and, unmistakably, the sharp, suspenseful crack as two glossy brown kernels collide mid-air. Not far away, the smell of turf mingles with the distant sweetness of a lion's-made Zoom lolly hastily unwrapped during morning break. An invisible sun tries its best to squeeze through, illuminating a tableau every bit as quintessentially British as the red postbox peering through the morning mist. To the uninitiated, it's just a game, boys and girls hunched around a battered shoelace. Memories of maths lessons temporarily shelved, faces pink with excitement and suspicion in equal measure. But to those who remember, nothing mattered more than the quest for sixes, niner champions, or the fabled conqueror of all conkers. The term championship seems grand, perhaps, for such a scruffy battleground, but try telling that to the 10-year-olds whose pockets bulged with potential. In the world of conquer duels, status wasn't won with speed or guile, but with patience, luck, and just the right tap on last Easter's roast skewer. 4 weeks before, the most intrepid raiders scoured churchyards and avenues in search of the fattest, shiniest specimens, haunted perhaps by the whispered legend of the vinegar-soaked, oven-dried conker. Did it really make them invincible, or was it just another bit of playground bluster? Each school had its own code of chivalry and chaos. At St. Cuthbert's, Friday lunchtimes meant a league table pinned behind the dinner lady's hatch, marked up in squeaking blue biro, with a suite for anyone brave enough to topple the reigning champion. At St. Mary's, there was a certain seriousness. Disputes settled by weary teachers, arguments over cracked conkers and contested turns, and the hapless miscreant occasionally banned for use of a dud. Conker matches even erupted beyond the gates. Outside the corner shop, with its sun-faded walls and rainbow, jars of penny sweets, postmen and dads would risk an elbow or two to guide their own small hopefuls immune for a moment to the realities of adult life, like bus fares, coal strikes, or the price of half a pound of butter. The spectacle belonged to everyone, the roar of encouragement, the hiss of sympathy as a once-proud conker exploded in a shower of dust and pride. The conkers themselves had a strange, tactile glory. Fat and cold, smooth in the palm, they seemed to glimmer with secrets. Children squatted on curbsides, threading their treasures hurriedly with battered darning needles and stolen bits of shoelace. Hands sticky from the juice, they eyed each other warily across the invisible battle line. Some swore by their granddad's method, leaving conkers on a kitchen windowsill for just the right amount of time. Others favored pure luck, straight from the shell, gleaming and vulnerable, yet somehow defiant. All manner of superstitions were tested. But nothing beat the suspense, the thrill of winding up for a devastating swing. The split-second silence before impact, and the scatter of fragments as a champion fell. The playground was a stadium, the crowd a mixture of friends, rivals, and that one boy everyone swore could shatter a conker with a single blow. Autumn conker matches spilled into the wider landscape of childhood, binding kids together in a secret parliament of exchanges and dares. If it rained, the game took shelter beneath dripping eaves, sometimes playing on stained stairwells behind rough brick estate blocks, their surfaces pitted by decades of similar pastimes. On milder evenings, you might hear the familiar sound echoing from pub gardens, a gruff dad or a kindly aunt offering tips over a half-of-mile saw. It was the sort of simple pleasure that thrived in an England where life was rarely easy but never truly dull when milk arrived on the doorstep before sunrise. Televisions flickered in black and white behind net curtains, and Woolworth's pick unmixed, meant choosing painstakingly, coin by coin, to stretch a precious pocketful of coppers. In the planning, in the practice swings, and in the unspoken schools of rivalry, these championships wove kids into the fabric of their communities, teaching lessons as durable as their nobbled contenders. But time, ever the adversary of tradition, has conspired against the playground championship season. The rise of computers, the arrival of the Sony Walkman, and later, Nintendo's handheld thrill, saw conkers moved to the margins. No longer the main event, but clung too stubbornly by a few. Insurance fears and whispered warnings about flying splinters nibbled at school enthusiasm, and health and safety officers eyed the biggest, heaviest conkers with poorly concealed dread. Horse chestnut trees themselves, once hallowed, gave way to car parks and expanded roads, features of the changing suburban sprawl, and an England that was slowly becoming less green in every sense. The school field, where so many matches were waged, might now house a new block of classrooms, or a netball court surfaced in hard tarmac. But in the memories of those who lived through these golden autumns, the game is inviolate, fiercely contested, unrefined, and gloriously absurd. So what did conquer championships really mean? In their heyday, they weren't just an excuse for playground one-upmanship. They were rites of passage, ceremonies of confidence, luck, and stubbornness. Here, in the age before smartphones and sponsored afternoons, children learned how to lose with dignity and win with grace, to cheer as loudly for a rival's flawless blow as for their own string of unlikely victories. They discovered the care of tradition, how each autumn someone's older brother would teach the new intake the sacred knot. How the year's champion became, for a few weeks at least, a legend unto themselves. Communities found pride in the little things, hedgerows heavy with treasure, weekends spent in pursuit of that elusive perfect specimen, benches where adults and children alike bonded over the silent judgment of a contest older than anyone present. And although the rules and rituals bent and blurred, the unspoken promise remained. As long as there were conkers to be found, some brave soul would thread. Under a sky mottled with cloud and the softest sort of sunlight, the playground seethes with the sound of small, excitable feet on tarmac. There is a smell of warm dust rising in the air, and the hard, hollow timbre of skipping ropes as they slap the ground. Against the fading paint of the hopscotch grid, a gaggle of children huddle by the edge of the yard, hearts thumping, all eyes fixed on the solitary figure ahead. In this charged stillness, a single call splits the air. "What's the time, Mr. Wolf?" It is the mid-1970s, somewhere in the sprawl of a Midland suburb, and the school itself is a low-slung, honey-bricked affair, with windows smudged by so many hands and faces pressed against them over the years, forever searching for relatives at home time. The playground is a patchwork of council-funded asphalt, squared off by Castian railings, with the odd curbstone dislodged, collecting puddles after rain. On a chilly spring morning, coats flap open to the wind, and the faint smell of dinner rolls wafts from the steel kitchen vent across the field. The children's shoes, Clark's Startright, a pair of cheap plimsolls threaded with orange laces, stamp and shift, never quite still. Wool-blend tights snag on splintered bench seats. Grazed knees peek out and quickly tuck away. On the boundary line, those not already chosen as Mr. Wolf twist hair ribbons between nervous fingers or trade miniature coins for a turn at the skipping rope. Pre-decimal pennies still shuttling occasionally from parent's purse to playground, hand just enough for a foil-wrapped toffee or a paper twist of sherbet at the corner shop after school. There is a magpie clatter from the far end, where two boys debate the true rules to British Bulldog. But here, the old rhythm stays. "What's the time, Mr. Wolf?" Each reply inches the throng forward. 3 steps, 5. Barefoot summers, recalled, and corduroy trousers tugged knee-high for the sprint. The anticipation is palpable. Every slow step crackles with the knowledge that at any moment the cry could ring out dinner time. And in a swirl of laughter and shrieked delight, the chase is on. Sometimes the role of Mr. Wolf falls to the quiet girl with plaits. Sometimes the older boy with last year's cowboy badge still pinned to his parka. There is a strategy here, understood instinctively. Stretch the suspense, let anxiety ripple and build, feed the giddy excitement. No one wants the thrill to end too quickly. The sharp, tinny clang of the bell signaling end of play hits like a jolt. But for a precious interval, time itself belongs to the game and those who play it. The teacher's slow circuit around the edge-trailing talk of gym slips and rounded vowels does little to disturb this ancient magic. In these fleeting minutes, it doesn't matter whose dinner money is short, or who forgot their kit for P. The politics of home life melt away, replaced by a heady cocktail of fear, exhilaration, and the brief illusion of mastery over the clock. Beyond the school gates, the wider world hums with its own routines. Milk floats, rattling morning glass along terraced streets, the jangle of coins in the bus conductor's pouch, dads at distant factories, mums queuing at fine fare for tins of Spam and the newest soap powder. Yet inside the playground, adult preoccupations shrink to nothingness. Playtime is the breathing space between arithmetic and spelling. A sliver of the day where imaginations can roam, and the threat of Mr. Wolf, at once delicious and benign, is the only thing worth fearing. On occasion, the scent of cut grass from the distant cricket ground drifts across, marrying with playground dust and the faintly metallic taste of a recently lost tooth. The wind carries with it the crackers knob of a Care Bear's lunchbox, or the rattle of marbles inside a battered satchel. The world outside could wait. As the seasons shift, each brings its own texture to the game. Autumn throws down a soft carpet of damp leaves, their decay muddied into shoes as the chill smarts red cheeks. Coats grow thick and scratchy, sleeves forever pulled down as makeshift mittens. Come the sticky days of summer term, the playground shimmers beneath the sun's glare, tar softening enough to press a thumbprint into ice lolly wrappers, Lion's Made or a local brand, drift along the fence, and the promise of holiday coach trips to Scarborough or Skegness buzzes on the horizon. Always, these games fill the in-between moments, holding back the tide of seriousness for just a little longer. The game of What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, is as old as anyone cared to remember. Mums and dads might say they played it too. In soot-blackened schoolyards, now vanished beneath supermarket car parks, or in rows of houses flattened to make way for the new ring road. The essentials never really change. A patch of ground, a handful of willing players, the flicker of excitement just before the rush. In the late afternoons, after school is out, kids might gather again at the field's edge, arms sticky from baking in the sun, jumpers discarded, voices hoarse from gossip and laughter. Sometimes an older sister, just home from the shops, is coaxed into being Mr. Wolf, and even then, there's a delicious thrill. What if she's faster? What if the gap between the start line and home is too great? But time, inevitably, kept its own pace. By the 1980s and into the 90s, playgrounds evolved. Safer surfaces replaced the worn grey tarmac. Metal railings swapped for cheerful plastic. Fewer games, needing no equipment, took hold as sports clubs and after-school activities grew. And lunch breaks grew shorter in the never-ending drive for better academic results. The lure of television Grange Hill, Blue Peter, or the bright pop of Saturday Superstore began to beckon earlier in the day. and by the time digital watches and electronic toys began to glimmer in children's pockets, the need to mark time through games, to measure the moments before the thrill, began to ebb away. Yet for those who played, the memories lodged deep, the tingle of anticipation, the giggle bordering on the edge of terror, the feeling for one enchanted moment that you were as fleet as the wind, untouchable by even the most fearsome wolf. These playground games were so much more than ways to pass a break. They were little rites of passage race. A brisk spring breeze stirs through the edge of a low-rise estate, nudging last autumn's leaves along the curbside as children's laughter echoes between washed, pebble-dash walls. Knees scuffed, hands gritty. They hover over a battered steel drain cover scarred by decades of northern rain, each clutching a small, iridescent treasure, marbles gleaming in the watery sunlight. It's somewhere in the early 1970s, hedged between the promise of Morecambe Bay bank holidays and the gentle drone of the rediffusion tele-humming indoors. The drain covers are unofficial territory, first come, first served, and hotly contested when the after-school bell sends tides of children out wearing wool jumpers with sweets half-fused in their pockets. They're lined up just so. The drain's iron grid transforms into a gladiatorial arena. Each rectangle a potential trap for the overconfident, thick-fingered boys and lightning-quick girls crouch low in the chilly air, strategizing, waiting for that flick and clack. Fingertips white with effort, the sounds ring out. Glass spheres click together like distant church bells, while a wayward shooter tumbles into a gutter groove, sparking gasps and cheers louder than any playground scuffle. Winners might pocket an extra marble, swallowing a grin, while the losers, tongue between teeth, plot their revenge for tomorrow. Close to the bike shed, still glinting with dew and smelling of chain oil and soggy duffel bags, the mood is half serious, half mischief. There, a constellation of plastic bags and battered satchels stand as a loose border, marking who's in for this round a league of their own, sorted not by age, but by the audacity of their skill. Marbles in this world have names and lore. The glittering cat's eyes, precious tigers, chipped alleys, and the kingly, slightly larger shooters, coveted above all else. You trade, you boast, sometimes you haggle, sometimes you sulk. The finest shooters, oft won from a corner shop for mere penny-shiny coins with Britannia on them, are brought out only for the grandest matches, rolling nervously in palms, half-warmed by anxious anticipation. Across the yard, the rest of the world goes about its business. Lorries grumble by on nearby rows, postmen whistle, a distant milk float purrs along its morning round, glass bottles clinking together. From the tuck shop around the corner, Woolworths if you're lucky, or a squat little newsagent's if you're not, boiled sweets and 1-penny chews shift in pockets, saved for a victorious endgame. Even the air has a particular tang. Fresh grass clipped short by a caretaker's mower, the acrid waft of tar from someone patching up the school approach, with that vague, comforting undertow of Hovis sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper. The glass marbles themselves are small marvels, brought to school in repurposed jars, or the cloth drawstring bags that once held Christmas chocolate coins. They come from Woolworths, or jumbled sales long lost in the hem of coats, unearthed in garden soil, or swapped under the knowing nose of a playground supervisor. Each one is distinct, catching the light in its own way. Some pristine, others roughened by concrete, bearing scratches that prove a dozen hard-fought tournaments. Pockets fill with their muted chink hands, idly tumbling them over on the borrowed warmth of a sunny step, comparing colors and patterns, inventing legends about mysterious ones discovered beneath the hydrangeas at the far end of the school field. Marble tournaments are semi-sacred rituals, the rules morphing ever so slightly with each cohort, passed down through murmurs more than memory. Amongst this ritual, luck and skill are knotted together. A perfect knuckle shot sends a marble skipping across the grid like a comet, whilst a misjudged flick leaves it wedged in the slots with barely a whimper. Sometimes a teacher passing by tuts, more for form than from genuine disapproval. For they know that these matches keep the peace as much as stoke rivalries. There's an unspoken etiquette, too. No double shots, no blocking with knees or elbows, a nod between adversaries before the decisive play. Here, while lunchboxes rustle and skipping ropes slap the tarmac, small fortunes in glassware change hands, promises made, grudges harbored, friendships kindled with a shared stash at day's end. As the afternoon deepens and cloud shadows lengthen across the asphalt, the last games play out against a chorus of distant radios and the peal of the school bell signaling imminent home time. Drizzle begins to dot the ground, casting rainbow shimmers over every marble surface. Jars and satchels are gathered up, losses tallied and alliances quietly recast for tomorrow's matches. A handful of diehards linger on, tracing finger patterns in the condensation on the bike shed's corrugated roof, speculating about new tricks or someone's cousin who owns a marble bigger than a conker. The marble arena empties, leaving only a lonely blue swirly caught in a gutter cracker, prize for the first pair of keen eyes after assembly the next morning. To the children who circled those drain covers, this was a time fueled by simple pleasures and small, everyday daredevil. The marbles themselves, a handful of glass plucked from the high street, were the currency of dreams. Their value as much in swapping tales as swapping prizes. The rhythms of marble tournaments, with their own code and customs, provided a sense of belonging in a world just beginning to open up. A world with new cars on the street, top of the pops on the telly, and pocket money that still came in through penny bits. In this microcosm, triumphs and heartbreaks flared and faded in a matter of minutes. Yet every scratch and every glinting wind became woven into memory just as surely as the hiss of rain on playground, tarmac, or the earthy scent of home time after a summer downpour. Slowly, these rituals faded, not vanishing so much as slipping into the crowd of new distractions. As the 1980s brought in microchips and home computers, children traded marbles for cassettes and game cartridges, the playground language shifting with the times. Corner shops replaced jars of glass with boxed toys and shiny stickers. Schools worried more about health and safety than knobbly knees and sticky palms. Yet the legend of the drain cover tournaments linger. A frosty breath hangs as mist in the morning air. Beneath it, schoolyard tarmac shines with a wet gloss, scattered with puddles and the imprints of trainers pressed in last night's drizzle. A whistle shrills, barely cutting through the distant din of traffic and the clatter of dustbin lorries. As children scatter, ragged whirl of navy jumpers, scuffed shoes, and hastily buttoned coats, each face alight with the urgent logic of play. Arms pump and trainers slap as the it of the game, cheeks flushed red with the chill. Barrels in pursuit, and the air splits with a chorus. Stuck in the mud, one by one, statues appear, arms frozen mid-stride, waiting for that liberating tap from a teammate and the glorious surge of collective escape that follows. Few games capture the mood of a 1970s or 1980s school break quite like Stuck in the Mud. It is nothing fancy, no bats or balls, no rules printed in a manual. Just the shared code of the playground, passed down in whispers and shouts. The boundaries of the game are invisible yet fiercely understood. The far edge of the netball posts, the shadow cast by the chestnut tree, the zigzag of hopscotch chalk fading near the bicycle racks. Laughter bounces from brick walls, mingling with the crispness of winter air, thick with the smell of dewy grass beyond the caretaker's shed and the faint lift of fried onions drifting from the chip fan idling at the corner in late afternoons. In this world, time stalks at a child's rhythm minutes, stretched out between the starting whistle and the end of break bell. On tarmac pitted and glittering with embedded stones, the game becomes a ballet of triumph and disaster. One moment you're running, the next you're snag-trapped with both feet planted. Arms extended, the icy chill of wind slicing up your sleeves as you bellow your plea to the sky. Come and save me. A friend charges by, risking capture, their palm striking yours in a flasher static fizz, and then release. The dizzying, exhilarating freedom of running again, lungs sharp with cold. Sometimes you don't escape in time. The tagger's hand finds your shoulder, heavy and quick, and in that instant, you become both obstacle and alistuck fast, but still watching, still hoping, still plotting escape. School uniforms were more about durability than fashion back then. Navy cords thick enough to survive the sliding tackles and knees-out skids that marked a competitive round, gloves rarely matched, if you wore them at all, and hats usually woolly or hand-meat, down flew off heads whenever a chase ratcheted up in tempo. You'd arrive home reeking faintly of soil and sweat and, inevitably, with a clod of tarmac grit wedged in your sock or trouser turn-up. At break time, the school's milk crates waited by the staffroom door, pyramids of little glass bottles, their foil lids glinting, promising a mouthful of cool, slightly sweet milk, a quick reward before the next round. Some afternoons, after the final bell, you'd spend your bus fare on penny chews from the corner shop, fingers sticky as you recounted the day's finest dodges and closest saves. In winter, your breath would fog the sweet jars as you pressed your nose to the counter, willing the lady behind the till to go easy with her scoop. The background hum of Britain in those years is stitched through every playground memory. From classrooms, the distant echo of the caretaker's radio, Terry Wogan's voice, mingled with the jangle of the midday news and a snatch of the Bay City Rollers, sifted out to the tarmac where children roared in pursuit of glory. Teachers, coat collars turned up, watched from doorways, hands wrapped around steaming mugs emblazoned with a school crest. Milk floats ambled down side streets at just the right speed for a sprint, the rattling of glass bottles in their metal crates marking time like a slow percussion. Near the gates, the lollipop lady in her high-wee sash looked on, umbrella in hand, her gentle authority another constant in a changing world. Even after school, the game carried over on rec grounds, cul-de-sacs and pebble-dashed closes ringing with laughter. Every estate had its gathering point, a patch of rough grass behind the garages, a line of washing poles, a sloping verge where the bravest tried to gain an advantage by hiding behind privet hedges. Streetlights, amber and humming by tea time, cast long shadows for hiding and sudden dashes. Some days, you'd play until you could scarcely feel your fingers, calling truce only when parents' voices drifted from doorsteps, summoning you home. If you were lucky, the day's adventure ended with hands wrapped around a mug of steamy instant soup, legs kicked out in front of the telly, the generation game flickering on the set. What did these games mean to the communities that played them? Stuck in the mud, like Bulldog, British Bulldogs, or What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, was more than just something to fill the gaps between lessons. It was a choreography of camaraderie and competition, a way to learn loyalty and quick thinking, rough justice, and the wild thrill of collective victory. Entire classes could join in, and for a moment the school's head girl and the quietest child from the back row stood equal in the scramble. It was a world where rules were enforced not by grown-ups but by the crowd, where a whispered "not fair" could spark a temporary ceasefire, renegotiation, and a boisterous restart. For so many, these memories are dusted now with the soft melancholy of things past. By the late 80s and early 90s, playground landscapes began to shift. New safety standards brought rubberized surfaces and neatly painted grids. Chalk grew scarce, playtimes shortened, playground supervisors replaced familiar teachers. The encroachment of homework, after-school clubs, and eventually home computers tilted the balance indoors. The television, once rationed to evening moments, claimed a greater share of children's attention. Modern concerns about risk and regulation meant games, like Stuck in the Mud, were politely discouraged, corralled into the safer margins of PE lessons, or abandoned altogether in favor of more sedate pastimes. Yet, for those who played, who ran and froze and yelled for a savior on a frosty morning, something enduring was left behind, a muscle memory of togetherness, of speed and laughter and agile.